So you have some high-level apostasies. The largest of these is William Law. William Law is going to ostensibly differ with Joseph over plural marriage and over the idea that mankind can become like God, the idea of a plurality of gods, and the idea that God himself progressed. This tension is going to lead to eventually the creation of the Nauvoo Expositor, which is a newspaper published in Nauvoo, which attacks church members by name, attacks their doctrines, and points out multiple reasons why the church is gone astray. Initially, William Law is going to found his own church, but that's actually pretty short-lived, and later in life he's decided that all Mormonism is just a farce and that he's left that. The Nauvoo City Charter, so this is going to be this is going to be something that will be certainly unique and different to a Latter-day Saint today. But remember, the Democrats were actually pretty eager to get the Latter-day Saints to settle in Illinois and not in Iowa, because it was a whole bunch of Democratic voters moving in. They grant a charter for Nauvoo that is incredibly broad, giving a great deal of power. Nauvoo has its own court system. Nauvoo is allowed to have its own militia. States have militias, counties have militias, but Nauvoo City has its own militia as a means of, hey, we're not going to allow this kind of murder that happened in Far West and at Haun's Mill to happen again. Well, the charter granted the city of Nauvoo the ability to remove nuisances to the town. When this newspaper began publishing, it made all kinds of accusations that Latter-day Saints were committing adultery, that Latter-day Saints were embezzling tithing funds, and again, naming people by name. The city council determines that this is a libelous press, meaning it's a press that's spreading lies. Now today, if someone's printing lies about you, you can still take them to court for libel and you can get an injunction and then they'll stop putting things on their Facebook about you. But then obviously laws are not as developed. And so the city council, and Joseph as the mayor, they order the destruction of the press as a nuisance to the town. This sets off a series of events that will lead to Joseph Smith being arrested and placed in Carthage jail.
So for timeline, the Nauvoo Expositor prints its first and only edition
in June,
on
yep.
June 7th.
Yep.
And it's on June 10th when the Nauvoo Council votes this is a public nuisance. And when it's a public nuisance and they're saying we refuse to not publish, well, what do?
You abate the nuisance.
And destroy the press.
They destroyed the press. That's what they did. They feel like they're on solid legal grounds. First of all, if anyone knows that presses can be destroyed and that no one goes to jail for it, it's Latter-day Saints, as they've experienced that. But the reality is they point to multiple legal instances of other cities naming a press as a libelous press and removing it from the town. But far more common on the frontier were presses being destroyed simply because people didn't like what they were being printed. And even in Illinois itself, not even a decade earlier, there was a very highly publicized case in which an abolitionist printer, Elijah Lovejoy, had his press destroyed 3 separate times and in fact was murdered the 3rd time. And there are no legal ramifications for this at all.
Nobody was brought to trial for that.
There's no legal ramifications. And so the Latter-day Saints believe, look, we're operating under what our press says. And again, they feel an urgency. Many of them felt like what caused the Mormon War in Missouri, where so much death and destruction happened, was that newspapers began publishing lies about what was going on in the church. And affidavits, for instance, from people like Thomas Marsh, that are claiming things that are wholly untrue. Thomas Marsh claims in his affidavit that Joseph Smith plans to create an Indian alliance and then march on the capital of Missouri. And after he takes Missouri, he's going to march on the capital of Washington, D.C. I mean, there's literally no evidence for this at all. But that stirs up animosity, which leads to the mob violence. So they feel like if we do nothing, it's going to lead to mob violence. If we abate the press, then we're within our legal rights because legally it says this is a nuisance. Now, of course, The rest of Illinois, and certainly their antagonists, and certainly William Law, are not going to agree with them. They are going to see this as a violation of the freedom of the press. They didn't care so much when it was Elijah Lovejoy's press getting destroyed, but suddenly the newfound love of freedom of the press is going on in Illinois.